And the longer I've practiced, the more I've sort of come to, I actually think the thing that we are purveyors of is wonder. And I think that that's really important, especially for our patients who have been burned out by the traditional medical model, who don't feel they are being serviced by their doctors, who are tired of the way things operate, business operates, the mechanics of it all operates. I think one of the things that is very fundamental to Chinese medicine and what we do is we say, we're going to do something that you don't even understand. There is a mystery, there is an artfulness, there is a wonder to what we do.
I'm Michael Max, and this is Qiological, the podcast that connects the voices of our acupuncture and East Asian medicine community. I'm not sure how business got to be such a bad word, or that it is somehow such a suspect activity. Sure, there are plenty of reasons that, air quotes here, business can be used as a buzzword to conjure up all kinds of bad feelings, and it's easy to point fingers at those who have been bad actors. I don't need to list them out for you. You probably already have a few boogeymen pop to mind just when I say the B word. It's easy to paint doing business as inherently evil or the domain of those with loose ethics. But consider this, business can also be a force for good in the world. It's an economic engine that allows creative people to sustainably build something that gives value, solves problems, and allows for a community of mutual exchange and benefit. It's a process that allows you to bring your vision into the world in a way that helps others. Businesses, especially small businesses, like politicians love to talk about as being the backbone of America at election time, can be a tremendous force for good and change. If you stop and consider this for a moment, you can probably think of at least a half a dozen businesses that you love to patronize. Businesses that make your life better and that make your community better as well. Running a business is not for the faint of heart. In fact, it requires heart, fortitude, courage, and a willingness to let the world show you where you were wrong, and the challenge of discovering that you were right without letting it inflate your ego. There's a storyline in our profession about, I'm a practitioner. I'm not a businesswoman or businessman. I have an opinion here. I think that's a cop-out. I think that we're better practitioners when we learn to face the issues of power, authority, authenticity, and financial responsibility that running a business will force us to confront. And I don't see running a business as being separate from the practice of medicine. Both are about cultivation. Both are about bumping up against our edges and using it as grist for growth. Both are about an ongoing process of development. Both afford plenty of opportunity to get it wrong on the way to getting it right. It's not that we have to do business. It's that we have the privilege of getting to have a business. We have the opportunity to create something that reflects our values and creativity, which sounds nice on the surface, but it also means that we get to have a clear-eyed look at our deficiencies and those underdeveloped aspects of ourselves, especially when it comes to relating with others. Again, any issues we have with power or authority will arise in the course of building our businesses. These issues are unavoidable, and that actually is the good news, because these kinds of issues also arise in the work we do with our patients. And if we can whittle away some of that learning on our business instead of on our patients, then everyone's further ahead. In today's conversation, I'll be talking with two practitioners who did not set out to build a business. It wasn't on their radar at the beginning. But they both have morphed their practices and businesses through more than one iteration into something beautiful and unique. Finding business and financial success is never a straight line. It's a winding path of discovery, of recognizing we're wrong again, and of staying connected to a dogged persistence that in time allows us to create a business and a practice that authentically reflects who we are. I've got a few announcements and a couple of housekeeping details, and then we'll get right into today's conversation. And even if you don't think you'll ever open up your own clinic, I think today's conversation will be worth a listen. All right, folks, hold on to your hats. We're about to get down to business with our guests, Russell Brown and Renee Klorman. I hope that you guys enjoy this conversation. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. All the sponsors here provide helpful products or services that you'll find beneficial in your clinical work. Want to get better at treating concussions and other neurological conditions? Clayton Shoe has some innovative methods. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. Later in the show, Jane offers you helpful suggestions on how to raise your rates, and Golden Flower Chinese Herbs shares a journey of healing that I think you'll recognize. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Geological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more. Ever found yourself listening to a geological conversation and thinking, wow, I needed to hear that? Yeah, me too. And I never know when I'm going to hear a guest say something that stops my world and reboots it with a larger perspective. If these conversations have ever helped you to feel more grounded, more inspired, or just less alone in this strange and wonderful work we do, consider becoming a member or supporting the podcast with a bit of tithing to the donation jar. It helps keep the lights on here at the Geological Sound and Motion Lab so that we can bring you these conversations every Tuesday morning. You'll find all the details at geological.com. Thanks for listening and for being a part of this.
Hey there, I'm Cameron Jafari, an acupuncturist from Los Angeles. So I started learning nanopuncture from Dr. Clayton Shoe because I was facing these complex neurological conditions like stroke and MS in my clinic, and I just felt like I lacked a solid process to treat them. Brain-related issues always felt like a whole different animal, and I was looking for a clinical system that worked and could guide me through them. So after attending my first nanopuncture seminar, I was able to apply the process pretty quickly and with pretty amazing results. I remember the first stroke patient I saw afterwards was a guy who had a stroke 2 years back, and he couldn't talk at all. And after a few treatments, he started saying a few words. And a few treatments after that, he could actually have conversations. It was pretty incredible. So this is why I feel like nanopuncture is the future of acupuncture neurology. And you can be a part of that. Their next seminar is on treating concussions and is being co-taught by both Dr. Shu and Dr. Ayla Wolf in New York City on April 26th and 27th. To learn more, visit nanopunctureseminars.com.
Today is a group discussion. I've got Renee Klorman and Russell Brown with me. These are two acupuncturists that I've had some contact with in the recent past. We are here today to talk about not the hassles of doing business, although we may talk about some of the hassles, but more to discuss the privilege of being able to do business, the privilege of being able to build the kind of life that you want to build. So I'm delighted to have you guys here. Why don't you each give a quick introduction to yourselves? Russell, let's begin with you.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Michael. My name is Russell Brown. I own Poke Acupuncture in Los Angeles, California. I grew up here in LA. I was a film executive before I was an acupuncturist, and then the pendulum swung the other way, and I ended up going to acupuncture school. I graduated from Emperor's in Los Angeles in 2007, and I opened Poke in 2008, 2009. That's it.
Great. Renee, what about you?
I am practicing in Nevada City. I graduated from Oakland in the East Bay. I've been practicing since 2012, and I'm initially from New York, and that's where I started school. And then I moved west and have been here for 10 years. And I owned a community acupuncture clinic for the first couple of years of practice, and then I moved to private practice after that.
Looking forward to hearing about that transition. I'd like to start with the question of, did you guys have any business background in growing up? Is this something that you were exposed to in your family, or did you have previous incarnations of your jobs that had you in touch with business? So what's in your background that might color the way that you see business these days?
My parents were educators. My dad was a high school guidance counselor and teacher. My mother was also a teacher, and then she ended up working for the IRS. We were not business people. There was never really the sense of like, you should own a business. That was not a goal of my family. I never, ever envisioned myself being a business owner, a small business owner. That was not a fantasy of mine. It still is not a fantasy of mine. I sort of found it all to be quite surprising, you know, and I think it's sort of the typical line, which is that no one goes to acupuncture school because they think they're going to want to be an amazing business runner, and then suddenly you find yourself having to run a business. But yeah, we were not business oriented people. My mom was a office planner. She was an architect essentially for the IRS, which is the closest any of us sort of came to like being a financial institution, I suppose. And it probably informed my relationship with money. I don't have a great relationship with money, frankly. And all of my family still to this day wishes I had a job that was just like a real salary job. They very much value that. I think there's a little bit of that sort of depression era passed down from generations of like, wouldn't it be easier if you just had a regular job? Like, wouldn't that just be a lot easier for you? Like, they just think that would be great. And even, you know, like I make perfectly good money, but I think still in the back of their mind, a benefits package would be a lovely thing for their youngest son. And that's just not what ended up happening. But a lot of things about me ended up happening. So what can you do?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I have looked at your website. You say that having a business was never a fantasy of yours. I looked at your website. I looked at the kind of clinic you have, the feeling of it, the sense of it. It's a fantasy place, man. You've really built something that is unique.
I appreciate that. That was sort of the idea. And I definitely think we can talk about it some more, but I definitely, you know, as the more I practiced, the more I was like, oh, right. Like that's my job here. My job here is to create a place that doesn't exist outside for my patients, and a place for patients to disconnect from their real lives. And that's why I do what I do. Like, and so the business kind of just became a product of that. The studio itself became a product of that.
That sounds like an amazing touchstone to go to day after day. We'll get more into that in a moment. Renee, what about you? What was your background with business, if you had any?
I did not have any. I was in academics and completely the opposite. My mom, she's a retired nurse, and business was not part of my upbringing. I did not learn how to handle money. I was not taught financial savvy, but I did have an entrepreneurial spirit and would always get into little projects. And with Chinese medicine, the interest for me has come from creating a seamless experience and trying to make, similar to Russell, just trying to create a healthcare experience that is not something people get elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, for me, and I didn't realize this until 5, 9, 10 years ago. I grew up in a family of small business people. So I had grandparents that ran furniture stores. My dad was in sales. So while he, ostensibly had a job, when you're in sales, you're basically self-employed. My mom ran her own business. And I can remember like family holidays, we, sit around the table talking, and, there'd be mention of like some cousin who got the big job somewhere, the big fancy job. But all around me were people that didn't have jobs. They had businesses. And I think that wore off in kind of a funny way on me. But it really took me a long time to realize that I had this in my background, because I too carried the story of, oh, I'm no good with money. Well, guess what? Being no good with money, going into business is going to teach you a lot about it. It's actually very helpful. But I thought I should have a job. It turns out that while I've had some in my life, I'm not the best employee. I'm actually not that good at having a job. So for me, going to acupuncture school, Russell, I was one of those people that looked at it and went, opportunity to do my own thing. I like that. That was a draw for me. I saw it at the very beginning, and it was actually an attraction. It wasn't a downside sort of thing.
It's so interesting that you sort of set up this dichotomy between having a business and having a job, because even in my day-to-day life, obviously I have a business that I love, and I'm so happy to be an acupuncturist, but I still think it's a job. Like, I feel like, oh my God, like I have such a job, and I have a job that never ends, and I have a job that requires me to go in all the time. But I definitely can't, this is the first time I ever even considered the fact that like having a business would be the opposite of having a job. Like, I work for a boss who is unrelenting, and that is myself. He very rarely gives me lunch breaks. He doesn't really validate my vacation needs. He can be a very cruel boss, but I definitely still feel like I work for the business. I have a job for my business, and my job is great, but it's definitely still a job for me.
Yeah. See, when I think of a job, I think of something that at the end of the day, I go home, I'm done. I don't have to think about any of it. But having a business, I mean, we all know this. At the end of the day, you got your taxes, you got your, bank accounts, you got your office to clean up, the list is endless.
Yeah.
You both spoke about creating a kind of space that doesn't exist for your patients to come in and have an experience. I'd like to know more about that. Renee, how about we start with you?
When I started the community acupuncture clinic, I looked at 20 spaces, and the space that I chose was an old dive bar, and it had been remodeled to look like an art gallery. And it just had a lot of personality, and it really was like walking into another world. And it was beautiful and huge, and I loved going to work every single day. And so the atmosphere was beautiful. And I had my invisible receptionist. So I worked out all the systems that people could schedule online. When they got there, they would pay at a separate station. Everything was done so then I could just work the entire time. And I was the only person doing all the work, but creating all these little things that made the experience seamless, allowed someone to just come right in, sit down, get treated. When I moved to private practice, my space is not as beautiful, but I maintained many of those systems to help patients not have to think about the process. And another one for me is I really like to run on time. And I find that that's part of adding value to the work that I do. And I know that I have people in my practice who come see me and they are very busy, or they have children, or they're on schedules. And I very much want to value their time. And I think because of that, they value mine. And that's part of that seamless, interaction.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that I use to keep my practice running smoothly. So let's talk about something that can be a little bit uncomfortable: raising your fees. I know, this is something that might feel awkward, but it doesn't have to. With a bit of planning and care, you can handle it in a way that feels right for you and your patients. One tip: give yourself at least 2 months to prepare. This gives you time to get comfortable with the change and let your patients know what's happening. You can share the news through emails, booking reminders, or even just a friendly little sign in your clinic, and avoid over-apologizing. Instead, keep it straightforward and matter of fact. Keeping things consistent across the ways that you communicate can really help avoid confusion. Fee increases aren't always easy, but you're not on your own here. For more tips and ideas on how to communicate these changes with confidence, check out frontdesk.jane.app and look for the article, How to Tell Your Clients You're Raising Your Fees. Oh, and one last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, use the code CHIOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. So you created a virtual receptionist. You created systems. You let the technology take care of all that stuff.
Yeah.
Can you tell us just a little bit about that? I mean, just like the broad brushstrokes for folks that might be going, "Oh my God, I'd love that." What are some of the pointers that you would encourage people to pay attention to with that?
If you use an online scheduler, which at this point feels that most people should because of the way we interact with our phones all the time and computers, but use all the bells and whistles. Really look at what your scheduler has to offer. And someone would schedule, and then they would get a confirmation, and they would get a reminder or a reminder text if they choose that. And then I would also send a follow-up. And for the one system I had, you could pay before you visit, but I don't do that anymore. Another one is having a lot of signage. So the moment they arrive, they know exactly where to go. They know where to put their coat, their shoes. There's scripts, because we all get asked questions a million times. And it's great for those types of scenarios to have something written out where people already have all the answers they need before they come in for treatment. I have an aftercare sheet for the very first appointment. Basically, those are the broad strokes along those lines.
Great. Wonderful. Yeah. Russell, what about you?
I feel very connected to my clientele and who my patients are. And so I really was thinking about, like, what is the experience that I want my patients to have? What is the experience that a person from Los Angeles, like a regular person in LA, would go to get acupuncture for? And for me, there's two types of patients. There are those patients for whom Western medicine has failed. The pain isn't getting better. The pain is getting worse. The digestive stuff isn't making sense. The tests failed. They don't really know. And then there's the other patient, who is the patient who is suffering from, like, the modern existential crisis, the, like, I'm stressed, but I can't get out of the stress cycle. My job is painful, but the job puts food on the table. How do I manage my life? What can I include into my life to make my life work, so that thus I don't have to abandon my life? And those are sort of the people that I really am speaking to, I think, mostly because that ends up becoming the bread and butter of a practice like mine. Most of my patients are coming in every 2 weeks, every week, and have for years. Most of my patients I've had for 10 years, and that they have managed to sort of make the acupuncture part of their existence. And, without getting too philosophical, like, I think that a lot of the wellness model, the idea of wellness that we currently have in the modern world is, are you well enough to go back to work, to the job that probably made you sick to begin with, right? Like, that's really what we talk about when we talk about wellness. Like, are you okay so that you can go back to working too hard, too many hours, for a conglomeration or for someone to make more money off of your blood, sweat, tears, and time? And so if that's going to be the system that we're operating from, especially here in Los Angeles, then there has to be ways built into that to take care of ourselves. And so I really have sort of think of what I do as being a support for those types of people. And as a result of that, I really wanted to create a space where a patient could come in and forget their life for an hour. And that was always the idea of Poke, is that I wanted it to say, could I distract you away from how much you hate your children or your spouse or whatever, your job? Could you see something else? Could you forget the narrative of your life for 45 minutes so that your nervous system can calm down? You can come out of fight or flight. You don't have to be in a car. You can feel just, pinned down. And I really take that metaphor quite seriously, and be in your body again. And so I've really built the space in my clinic and really the experience of what I do around that philosophy. My old clinic, I had, when I opened Poke, I really was trying to distract people with stuff to look at. And I had art, and it was very full of things. And I sort of was doing a real eclectic mix. And then I moved offices last year because I really felt like we have enough things to look at. And I really just feel that the internet and the culture has sort of decided that we should be distracted and we should be looking at things all the time. And my new space, which I think is probably the only one you've seen, Michael, is really just, I wanted to give people some breathing room. I wanted really high ceilings. I wanted a lot of air to breathe. And that's really what I'm trying to do for the most part, is I'm just trying to create a space where a person doesn't have to feel inundated by life, by Instagram, by the world, by more information, and to really take a break from that and to just be in a space where they're not trying to digest for, an hour once every 2 weeks. And so that was kind of a lot of the guiding principle around the space that I've created and the business that I'm working on.
Yeah. That's so interesting, Russell, that you've gone from this idea of we're going to distract you away from all the difficulties in your life, and in creating this newer space, you've actually gone the complete opposite way. Very minimalist. It's spacious. I look at the pictures of your office and I just go,
That was intentional. Like my old space, I can send you some photos. It was beautiful, but like I almost felt irresponsible because, when I created it, it was 10 years ago, and it was before a lot of the world became a little bit full, I would say, and full of stuff. And even I was going to work and I'd be like, I don't want to look at anything else. I feel like I am digesting so much on a daily basis. I'm being asked to digest so much on just a moment to moment basis. And I really felt like I feel a little sick of it. I can't take in any more information is how I feel. And I felt it was a little irresponsible for me to even ask my patients to, after a while, to be like, you don't have to look at the things that I think are funny. You don't have to look at the art that I think is clever or beautiful. I want you to have an opportunity to just not be processing. And that's really was a lot of what I thought about when I was building this new space, which I built for myself last year. Like, how do you not digest? What does that feel like to just actually have all the information you need for an hour and be okay with that? You don't have your phone, you don't have a magazine, you don't have a book, you're not going to take in anything new, and you're not going to give away anything either. You're not giving energy to your family. You're not, that entire exchange I really wanted to break down of, there is nothing to lose. You owe nothing, and you're going to get nothing back. And that's really one of the things that I try to get my patients to understand, because we don't have an opportunity to do that. If you have children, you don't have an opportunity to do that. If you have a dog, you don't have an opportunity to just hold and to be held.
Yes. So you've created a sense of sanctuary.
That was the idea.
I know that we're all practicing in different parts of the country. And when I was a New Yorker, the experience that you're creating, Russell, very much reflects your environment. And when I moved away from the city, being overstimulated is just not part of rural country life. So it's fascinating thinking about this as a podcast for people developing their practice and developing ways to be part of the community that, in an overstimulated environment, what can you do? How can you integrate Chinese medicine into their lives in a way that will feel healing? Here, I can just ask people to drive down the road and go stare at the river for an hour after a treatment, or walk across the street. There's a trail that walks right in the town, or take a moment and go sit somewhere in the woods. And it's just a very different, I don't have the same in terms of the way people are stimulated. It's very different.
That sounds amazing. I could almost fetishize just everything you just said about going down to the woods. Like, and that's one of the things I'm very clear. My practice is on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood.
Oh, wow.
Like, I'm in it. And so I really have to think about that. And so and it was sort of like, could you build a sanctuary on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood? And I think probably coming from the film industry, where I was, I was a development executive for the Fast and Furious movies. Like, I get a very specific world that is part of being a Los Angeles person. And I understand who those people are. And, half of my patients are Netflix employees. And I feel very close to that person and how that person has to operate in the world. And even just like to be in your car in Los Angeles, you have to be armored in a very specific way. The streets are tight. You're just trying to not hit each other, like, how do you park? Parking is very hard in Los Angeles. All of it is just such an assault on the senses that you're like, how do you make a cushion? How do you cushion yourself from that assault? And so that question is very much a part of what I do. And it's very Los Angeles specific. And I sort of invite every practitioner to think about like where you are, who is your person where you are, and how do you speak to what the needs of that person is.
This is such a lovely demonstration of both of your creativity in that you've already had a couple of different businesses. They've been different kinds of businesses. And as you've grown in your work as an acupuncturist and as you get a sense of what a business is and what you want to make it, you've actually created really different spaces as you've developed your skills and developed your perception of how you fit in your community.
And how do you make Chinese medicine relatable? What do we do as business owners to tell a story about how we entered, something that feels very foreign to most people, and how do you bring it into their world?
That's the secondary challenge right then, is then, oh, right, we also have this like medicine that does not speak the same language as probably most of our patients. It doesn't come from the same place. It precedes the age of reason. And that is very hard for a lot of people to get behind. And I think that is then the other thing, is like, how do you bridge that gap?
It's part of, for me as a business person, the joy of creating something that works for me and works for my patients. An opportunity to look and see, where can I help and how can I help in a way that's different than the usual medical model? Because we get to bring in not just the treatment we do, but the environment that we create is not disconnected from the treatment that we do.
Yeah, and everyone's constellation of challenges or inhibitions and fears in their practice is going to be different. It's easy to want to emulate what you see a successful practice looking like, but the truth is that how you create a practice is going to be really unique and individual. And I think it's difficult to follow through on that when there are so many fears in our profession about running a business.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the things that's been running through my mind lately is being very attentive to the difference between a busy practice and a successful practice.
Very much. Keep it simple. Don't add too much. Really, just be good at what you do. And the more you add, the more time you have to spend feeding and watering those things that you add. So,
Renee, what took you from doing the community work to a more private practice?
well, that's a fun can of worms to get into. Living in the East Bay, I was part of the community of community acupuncturists who were really excited to bring an accessible option, clinical option. And I attended the very first CAN workshop that was brought to Berkeley. And from there, I was very involved as a student and just I loved the community acupuncture model, and I loved the people, and I really enjoyed having that be a drive while I was in school. And so it seemed natural to go right into community acupuncture. And I applied for a POCA loan, and I received a microloan of $7,500 to open my clinic. And I was one of the first 3 people to get a loan to do that. To have that loan, I had to follow very strict guidelines, and I had to be listed on the website and only do acupuncture. And I was allowed to do herbs, but it was really challenging. And I love herbs. The transition was I was treating 50 people a week, and really to make it sustainable, you have to treat 100 people a week. But I wanted to be able to prescribe herbs. And in order to do that, I could only see 50 people a week, which is about 4 people an hour. And 6 people is really the ideal. I was working very hard. My practice took off. It's easy to market a community acupuncture practice. And that wasn't the part that was hard. The part that was hard was holding this space and working 80-hour weeks. And I just got burnt out. I tried too many different things. I mean, I take my own advice now about keep it simple. I had a big space, so I could offer Qigong classes. I offered free lectures. I had a person come in and teach yoga. I would make external medicines. I was just running really hard. And
one woman. This is a one-woman show.
Well, I brought other people in to do the free lectures and the Qigong and the yoga, but I was managing all of that. And it was a one-woman show. It was just too much on top of being a clinician and being at the beginning of my career. And I was also in Sharon Weizenbaum's 2-year graduate mentorship program at the time. So I was seeing this contrast of what I was doing. And I don't mean this to be a negative, but I was diluting Chinese medicine in order to create something accessible. And it was upsetting to me, and it became something that I just could no longer do. And when I finished the graduate mentorship program, I just made a decision that I really wanted to be more involved with herbs. I wanted to be more involved with touching patients, with spending more time with them, because I think the things I'm most interested in are the full spectrum of Chinese medicine. And I just couldn't do that in community acupuncture. So I shut down my practice. I hiked the John Muir Trail as a cleanse. And then I came back and I opened up the tiny house of private practice. I have 2 small rooms compared to my very large 1,200 square foot office before that. And there was a huge learning curve, and it's a completely different animal to run a private practice than a community acupuncture practice. So it took me a year, and I lost probably 80% of my practice, and I had to rebuild.
Just because it was too expensive for them after you had reopened?
That's a great question. I wrote a letter, and I don't know that many people read the letter, because I live in a smaller town, so I've run into people since then, and they were surprised that I wasn't doing community acupuncture still. So it's hard to know. I think, yes, I think the price point, but I've kept my prices pretty low. I worked on a sliding scale for a long time. I've adjusted things to try to bring in more of the people that used to come see me. And over time, I've just built a new practice. I mean, my skill set is very different now than it was. I created a residency for myself, a 2-year residency. I think I had treated 5,000 people by the time I was done. So, I got a lot of hands-on work. I got really good at needling, very good at trusting my diagnosis, my instincts. And then from there, I was able to build on. So it had tremendous value. And it breaks my heart that was something that the choice I had to make, but it was definitely, for my health, it was the best decision.
I think it sounds amazing. I'm so inspired by that, I have to say. And I think there's something really inspiring about, like, I tried this thing. It didn't work. It really, it was hugely successful. The patient load wasn't the problem. The problem was I didn't like it and I didn't want to do it anymore. I think that I think that is such a beautiful story, especially for other acupuncturists to hear, because I think so much of what we're hearing about is there aren't enough patients. People can't make it work. The money's not good. And it's like, no, actually the patients are out there. Like, I don't really believe that the patients aren't out there. I think they're out there. I think people want to know. I think people are curious. I think there's a reason why the medicine has lasted as long as it did. And for you, your problem was not getting people in there. Your problem was that it didn't line up with the core values that you wanted to do when you were doing the medicine to begin with. And I don't think people really talk about that as like, am I getting what I need to get out of this career? Is it satisfying the thing inside me that speaks to why I started to do this work? I'm amazed it only took you 2 years to recognize that it wasn't working for you. I would have sat there probably for another 6 years and been like, no, the people are showing up. I have a client load. I have to stay, and let that guilt kind of run me to the ground. It's sort of, I find it to be really inspiring that you were like, nope, I'm good here. I'm going to take some time off, and then I'm going to figure out exactly how I do want to work. I think that's so clever.
It's a whole different way of thinking about success. Usually we think success, it's a steady state. I've gotten there. I got it. I just keep it going. But success could be exactly what Renee experienced. I did this thing. I pulled it off. It worked. It no longer works. I'm a different person now. And now it's time to pivot into something different.
And I was at a crossroads. I had one choice, which was I really could have become a big clinic. I could have hired people, but I struggled with not being able to pay them a living wage. And that was very important to me. And in order to do that, I would have had to step up into more of a business owner role rather than a clinician. And I really wanted to just practice Chinese medicine. And most of success I've found has come in a series of tiny dares. I just dare myself to do something that's very, very uncomfortable. And when I do that, I just, keep upping the game.
I love that phrase, success in tiny dares. Oh my God, it sounds so accessible, right? It's not like, oh, my whole life hinges on this. I'm going to do this little dare. Could you give us an example of a tiny dare that was helpful?
When I first moved to Nevada City, I knew absolutely no one. I think we knew our real estate agent. That was it. I was about to open this clinic and I had just taken out a huge loan and was completely broke. And I created flyers and I just walked. I was terrified of talking to people. I'm an introvert, and I I just forced myself to walk into every single business in Nevada City and Grass Valley and say, hi, here's a flyer. I'm having a grand opening party. Come and get some free acupuncture. I think I walked into over 100 businesses. And
Renee, that is a terrifying story. That is absolutely terrifying. You're my personal hero today. Like, that is crazy. And because, every acupuncturist is an introvert. We all think of ourselves that way. The idea that you're just like, let me talk to strangers about acupuncture with nothing but a flyer and like maybe a smile on my face is completely like my fight or flight nervous system just got activated.
Yeah. And it's like the birthday party where you feel like no one's going to show
totally.
up. So.
Like, please talk to me about something you had no interest in 2 seconds ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's brilliant. There's another thing that I hear you guys talking about, and it has to do with money and the way we think about money and how so often we think that charging less is an act of generosity. But increasingly, I'm thinking generosity has nothing to do with the prices that we charge. It has everything to do with the value that we provide. So just a couple of examples. Renee, you were talking about how you like to run on time. It's really important to you, and respecting your patients and their time is really important. I would call that a deep act of generosity, very deep act of generosity. And Russell, with what you're doing in creating the kind of space on Sunset Boulevard for people that are part of the Fast and Furious crowd to come and unplug, huge act of generosity. So often we think it's just about money. It's about, can I charge low enough to attract people? Or can I make it financially, I'm using the word accessible here in air quotes, because I think that people have all kinds of different ways of thinking about money and value that are probably super different from the way that we think about it. And it's very easy to get caught in our own echo chamber of what's really of value and totally miss what it might mean for our patients.
One of the biggest errors that I repeat, unfortunately, is I do discount my practice at times, and I send out, a newsletter and say, hey, come in this month and get $10 off. And every time it falls flat. That's never a successful approach. And I have to constantly face that fear of what's going on. Am I feeling abundant or am I feeling the scarcity? And obviously I think that the discounting, I feel the scarcity, and that's hard.
Renee, when you say it falls flat, what's falling flat?
No one ever takes advantage of it. I mean, I think I've done one of those specials, but it was when I introduced doing a new service. So I started doing craniosacral and acupuncture together. And that was probably, in the 5 years of living in this area, the most successful offering, where I discounted the price to get people to come in. But other than that, I maybe get one person out of a list of, over 500. So
what do you think attracts people to us if it's not price?
I think about that a lot. And the longer I've practiced, the more I think, when I first started, I was very clear. And like, I was like, I'm an acupuncturist. I don't do crystals. I'm not, I'm like a grounded acupuncturist. I'm like, not like one of these like hippies in billowy yoga pants. And I don't say namaste. And like, that was a very important philosophy for me to be like, I'm not like your off-putting, like, hippie acupuncturist. I'm a regular person. And the longer I've practiced, the more I've sort of come to, I actually think the thing that we are purveyors of is wonder. And I think that that's really important, especially for our patients who have been burned out by the traditional medical model, who don't feel they're being serviced by their doctors, who are tired of the way things operate, business operates, the mechanics of it all operates. I think one of the things that is very fundamental to Chinese medicine and what we do is we say, we're going to do something that you don't even understand, and you're going to make peace with the mystery of not understanding it. And that is what I offer that no one else probably in your life can offer. There is a mystery. There is an artfulness. There is a wonder to what we do. And I definitely think that is that is something that I feel very close to, is see how you feel. Maybe don't even ask why. Maybe you don't need to know. Maybe you never knew how anything else made you feel. You never knew how pharmaceuticals worked. But for this one, you're going to trust that there is something just outside of your reach, and that mystery could be beautiful, and it could be worth an hour of your time and a little bit of your money. The longer I've practiced, the more I really am trying to tap into that, because I think, especially with the world and fake news and information and trying to make things concrete and trying to pin things down, I think there is something really beautiful and freeing about saying, I'm going to let go of sort of the didactic nature of my existence for an hour, and I could just release a lot of that for a little bit. And that's one of the things I think that I am offering that very few businesses can say they offer outside of Chinese medicine.
I mean, that experience, Russell, is priceless.
I also think tangential to that is, and it's like I said before, it's the stillness. Who is offering you stillness? Who is saying do nothing? Who is saying for a half an hour, you get to just be in your body. I'm going to pin you down. I'm going to say no distractions. No one needs anything from you. Explore your relationship to just being here right now. Like that's amazing. No one does that. You can't put a price on that, at least in Los Angeles, I think. Like, you really can't. You can't say you're not going to be asked anything of. You don't have to hustle. You don't have to be anyone for anyone else. And all you have to do is explore what it feels like to be in your body. Torturous, awful, wonderful, all of the things that come up while you're laying there and you can't move and you can't go anywhere. I think that exploring that relationship is one of the things that we do that is just absolutely necessary for so many people in 2019.
Imagine this. A patient walks into your clinic. They're carrying more than the pain in their body. There's a story there. A history woven with the stress of long days, the ache of things unsaid, and the quiet longing for something to shift. You listen, not just with your ears, but with your hands, your intuition, your heart. It's not just about needles or a formula. It's about connection, understanding the threads that tie us together, mind, body, and spirit. That is where Golden Flower Chinese Herbs comes in. Rooted in tradition and crafted with care, their formulas are more than herbs. They're a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern practice. Every bottle, a quiet partner in your work, helping you to meet your patients where they are. Because healing isn't just about treating symptoms. It's about creating trust, cultivating belonging, and helping someone feel truly seen. Golden Flower Chinese Herbs, your partner in practice and connection, where tradition meets care. This is such a beautiful counterpoint to the way acupuncture is often sold, right? We're trying to sell it as this evidence-based medicine, or we've got this research, or we promise that you're going to get X, Y, or Z. And you're offering the complete opposite of that.
I'm not interested in evidence-based acupuncture. Acupuncture is from before the age of reason. I don't think it helps me sell what I do, to be like, here's the study I found based on the Western trial that probably is creating conditions that made you sick to begin with. I just am not interested.
And you're also in the center of a universe where other people are creating the suspension of disbelief for everybody else.
Totally.
So the fact
Exactly.
the fact that you can do that for your patients, you are aiming to offer that to the people that are creating that for everybody else, is really pretty amazing.
Wow. Well, for a couple of people that weren't so keen on doing business, you guys sound like you thrive on this.
I mean, there are parts of it that get exhausting, but I love both. I love using my right and left brain. I love thinking about how to help people understand the why and how of this mystery of Chinese medicine, that it is thousands of years old. And there's so much that you can grasp from creating the paradigm shift. And that's the challenge, is helping people think ahead rather than just in the moment. What are you doing to prepare for your summer health now?
My teacher, when I was my primary teacher in acupuncture school, was a very, very wise woman named Yvonne Farrell. And right before I was graduating, I think we had breakfast one day, and I was like, am I going to be an acupuncturist? Like, am I really going to do this profession? Like, is this really what's going to be the thing for me? And she sat there and she said, it may as well be acupuncture. Like, you're going to do what you're going to do for your patients. And acupuncture is a great umbrella to do a lot of things. You can be a guide to your patients. You can be a counsel to your patient. You can just be a voice to your patient. You can be an educator as an acupuncturist. It's actually a very wide range of things that we're allowed to do with our patients under this profession. So she was always like, for what you want to do, acupuncture is a great place to do it. It's a great structure. It's a great umbrella for a lot of work. And I really believe that. And I think the longer I practice, it's been, a dozen years now, it changes. And the things I can do for my patients has changed. And I really appreciate that acupuncture as a model has supported a lot of the changes that I wanted to do.
I do love that about the practice part. And that's the fun part about being in control of how you market, being a business owner, is that when I learn something and I go in deep and I want to bring that to my patients, or even if I learn something on the surface and I find it interesting, I'm completely in control of how that shapes the way I practice and how I make money and how I market and how I talk to people. And yeah, it changes year to year. And not that there's the anchor of practicing Chinese medicine, but you're right. This field has so many different things that you could be an expert in. And it's okay to dabble and then to go deep and then to dabble again. I think that's healthy.
Yeah, I found that it really has been an opportunity to show me parts of myself that I wasn't aware of, or interests that I have that were maybe laying latent. But through the practice and the way the practice shifts me and shapes me, there's all kinds of ways that I've had an opportunity to live my life that I would not otherwise have had.
I do think that is what builds a successful practice. I mean, we can have the skill set, but if you don't know how to tell your own story about what brought you to Chinese medicine, what makes you passionate about what you practice, what motivates you to do your job well, what teachers inspire you and why they inspire you, those are the reasons why people will come to see you. The better you can articulate those pieces, the more people don't care about how much they pay you. Then they won't think about that. They'll think about all the things that you're offering because you've been able to clearly articulate why you do what you do.
And just piggybacking on that, which I think is totally true, is, and I've said this before, and I don't know if I actually believe it, but I say it all the time, which is like, I have a real enthusiasm for being alive, and I want my patients to see that enthusiasm. I think sick people need to feel that electricity for existing, and I want my patient, when they come up from the needles, to be like, I love that guy. Like, I think they have to love you a little bit. I think they have to think you're amazing, and that they want to spend an hour with you every 2 weeks. They should be a little bit in love with you, and not like in a sexual way, but just to be like, whatever that spirit is, I'm so glad it's in my life. I think that it's not enough to just be a technician of needles and to know the studies and to put the points in. I think there has to be a real enthusiasm for living and just a curiosity for life. I think that's one of our jobs. And I hope that my patients feel that from me, and that when they leave my space, they're like, oh, wow, something excited me. I learned something new. I'm curious about something new. It's a great world.
That love piece is interesting. Without sounding corny here, I find that when there is that sense of appreciation and exchange between my patient and myself, maybe they've lit something up in me. I love watching something light up in them. That, beyond the needles, whatever the needles are about, that there's something in an authentic human exchange where people have a moment where they can be seen and where they can see. A big piece of what keeps me doing the work, I find it incredibly nourishing, and it seems to be helpful to the people who come to see me because of just the things that you were talking about, Russell, that there is something that they get to tap into and touch that has to do with authentic connection.
Michael, when you first mentioned doing this panel and the idea of the practice of practice, that idea of being seen, being able to walk into the clinic space every single day and start with a fresh palette is, for me, the practice of practice. That I want to be able to hear what somebody is saying to me without having all of my filters or the noise going on. And that in itself can be a treatment. I mean, I could do very little in a treatment and have somebody walk out feeling like something really profound happened. And I feel like, oh, I just stuck a few needles in and maybe, palpated the leg, or, that it didn't feel that special to me, but whatever space I was able to create worked.
Yes, I have found there are moments, sometimes the conversation with the patient, something will shift. The room will feel different. The needles after that are just to set what just shifted in their chi field.
Yeah. My teacher used to always say that the work is done before the first needle goes in. And I don't know if I do that every week, but she really believes that the work is done before the first needle goes in. And the needle is there to sort of corroborate the work that was just done. That's how I was taught.
Wow.
I had a patient the other day. I don't know when this will air, but it was Valentine's Day last week. And someone sent me a Valentine's Day card. And she said that, "Thank you for being the only man who listens to me," which she was joking, but it was still really funny to be like, oh yeah, that's how I show up for people. I'm the only man who listens to her.
Again, there's that expression of generosity, right? Beyond the prices that people pay, there's the value. There's that generosity of spirit right there. That's great. We've talked a lot about all the beauty that comes out of having the practice of a practice. I'm curious to know right now, what are some of the challenges that you're facing in your practice and in the work that you do?
I think I'm in a bit of a growth stage, so I feel like an awkward teenager answering this question, that every time I've made a big leap in the success part of the practice, I've had this really uncomfortable awkwardness. And I'm in that right now. I'm trying to figure out how I want to practice, if I want to work with other people, what that would look like. I've been working alone for a long time, and I really love the collaboration. I think I want to work with other people and geek out, about the patient. And then the other piece is I'm integrating this functional movement material into my practice. And it's challenging to be able to do that and figure out how to balance communicating the Chinese medicine side and communicating the functional movement side, and making that sound like a cohesive treatment. And then how do I get someone to continue? I've gotten very good about compliance with herbs, about coming to acupuncture, about coming in for treatment. And now I'm asking somebody to do a lot of work outside of the treatment room than I did before. And I'm really in an awkward phase of how do I sound confident asking somebody to do a lot more work than I think they want to do.
In some ways, it sounds like you're dealing with the problems of success.
I guess so. But I find that every time I go through these stages, my practice slows down quite a bit. And I think my heart, when I open up to the world again, it fills, and I have to just trust that process. And so I'm right in the middle of it right now. I'm in that bottleneck.
Inhale and exhale, huh?
Yeah. I wish I was consistent about that.
Well, that would be called holding your breath. That's not going to happen. That's not going to last long.
Or more the meditation, that I know that it feels good and I'm just consistently inconsistent.
There you go. Russell, what about you? What are your challenges right now?
My challenges are, I've experienced the same challenge for years, and it's the one I feel like we don't really talk about collectively as a group of acupuncturists or even anyone. But like, my number one challenge is that I have days where I don't have it in me. I don't want to talk to another person. I'm an introvert, and I have days where I show up and I'm like, it's not there today. I actually I don't have a lot of compassion today. I feel it dry out, but yet my schedule doesn't know that that's going to be the case today, and how I then take care of myself on a day like that. And I don't know if it's just like I'm too busy and it's all success, blah, blah, blah. But I do feel like, what do we do about those days? How do I take care of myself on those days? Because otherwise I'm faking it, which doesn't feel very good to me, or I leave and I'm completely depleted at the end of the day. But I haven't quite, after all these years, really figured out how to be a person who is ultimately likes to be alone and doesn't necessarily have the greatest social skills, and also be someone who has to be with, 14 strangers very intimately all day long, or 10 strangers, or however many patients I have for the day. I haven't necessarily ever been able to reconcile that.
I so appreciate you articulating that. And I think you're right. I think we all experience it. There's just days the well's a little bit dry. I mean, there's days people get some really great juicy stuff from us, and then there's the days where, sorry, not raining today.
Yeah. And I personally, I'll cop to it. Like, I'm not just not feeling it. Like, I'm cranky today. And what do I do about that? Like, I'm not a people person today. A lot of the times I am, but today I'm not a people person. And yet the books doesn't know that. And I find it to be very challenging. Like, I just find it. And I don't know if it's like I need to take more days off. I'm sure that there's really probably very functional ways for me to handle it, but it's the unpredictability of it. And that's some of it. And part of it, like, I'm almost like open to the fact that, like, is this a hormonal thing? Do I have like, maybe is this like a weird testosterone drop that happens every 3 months? And I have 2 days where I'm like, I just can't get it up today. And I don't want to pretend. And I feel weird about calling my patients and just being like, I'm canceling today because I'm very, very cranky because my constitution is coming out. I don't know. And I've never been able to reconcile it, but I'm having that like literally this week where I'm just like, I'm a little not in it and it doesn't feel good.
And that's part of wearing the many hats of being a business owner is you have to take care of yourself. And that's often the thing that gets tossed to the side. So by the time you reach your cranky state, it's too late. And then you just have to power through it. And that's also challenging because then you're starting at a deficit when you build back up. It's the roller coaster of being a business owner is definitely one of the things that we don't learn in school. And it's hard to ride those waves. And that does affect the clinic.
And also, I think, like, if we worked for a company, I would go to human resources and be like, I would talk to my HR rep and be like, I'm not feeling it today. I think my boss doesn't appreciate me. I feel taken advantage of. And I would like to take a personal day. I would like to take a sick day today. And we don't have those businesses. I don't get to talk to HR. I am HR. And my HR representative is unsympathetic to my plight, or he's semi-sympathetic, but he's not going to do anything about it. And I don't know where to place that angst, and I can't write a letter to anyone because I would only write a letter to myself, and I don't want any more work. I don't want any more mail.
The joys of running a business. This is great. Wow.
Correct.
Well, hey, you guys, I can't believe an hour has gone by already. This has been really a delight to chew the fat with both of you about the practice of practice. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners before we wind this thing down today?
I think we do cool work. Like, I think it's a great job. And I have to remember that a lot of the times too. I talk about sort of being cranky and things, but like, I also think that I have a beautiful world that I've made for myself, and we can make it anything that we want. And I don't think we're competing with each other. I think that we're all doing great work. And I like to think that, like, anything that's good for acupuncture is good for other acupuncturists, and anyone who's putting out good work and making other people everywhere think that acupuncture is good, then that's great work. And I like to meet other acupuncturists. I think everyone's doing their own thing, and I think that's how it's supposed to be. And I think when I was younger, I used to be like, oh, she's that kind of acupuncturist and that kind of business. And now I just think we're all great.
If someone is just building their practice and they're listening to this, or they're in a phase where they're not able to pay their bills, or trying to build a successful practice, one thing that I've done is to challenge myself to do one uncomfortable thing each week, and to just ask myself when I'm in a slower phase or in a growth phase, am I doing everything I can to build my dream practice. And if I can't even answer what that dream practice looks like, then that's the place to start.
Yep, that's success in tiny dares.
Yeah.
Thank you, both of you, for this time today. I feel inspired. Actually, I usually feel inspired, but I feel even more inspired today to, see what the day brings. And I hope that you listeners out there have found this to be helpful as well. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.